Welcome to Prix Game, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in and cheers. So, up on deck today is Mercedes. I am a bit of a Red Bull fanboy, admittedly, sue me, whatever. And John, I know you're not a Mercedes fanboy necessarily. You're more of a Lewis fanboy.
I am.
So, yes, you are. And you'll get plenty of time to talk about him. I promise. But first, as promised, the tasty tidbits that you can talk about at the bar with your friends. And we start with something that's pretty dry, but if you want to impress somebody at a bar that's a Mercedes fan, just know that Toto Wolff has implied that his successor is going to be one of the directors in the racing program, James D'Ambrosia. And there are some other minor updates from the garage regarding Lewis Hamilton, or rather, lack of updates regarding Lewis Hamilton.
No contract, Colin. No contract signed. And it's bizarre, honestly, for a guy who has been as much of a team player as Lewis over the last near decade. It's very bizarre that they can't get this contract signed. I'm hearing rumors that perhaps part of the reason for the delay is the fact that Lewis wants a piece of the racing team itself, that he wants to be an owner and take ownership of the team in a similar way to someone like Michael Schumacher or Niki Lauda. I think that is a valid step forward for him as a driver, but also as a figurehead. And for someone who is invested in the sport as much as he has on track, I think it makes sense for him to want to maintain ownership in the sport off track as well.
And you talk about marketable assets, right? I mean, Lewis Hamilton is popular. People love Lewis. They really, really do.
Agreed. And frankly, from an American perspective, this looks like almost a Muhammad Ali kind of moment where, he experienced a enormous setback in 2021 at the Abu Dhabi GP, and it was a controversial race result. It was a controversial championship result. And 2022, we saw him struggle like we really never have in this sport. This season seems to be different as the car has evolved, shall we say. Fits and starts. A 14B for Mercedes seems to be the glass slipper for him in ways that George Russell still is struggling with. But I think obviously that contract is going to get done. Mercedes has to retain Lewis at least through the end of the regs in 2025. George is just not ready to take the first seat at Mercedes. And we're going to see what happens. But honestly, I think we're all waiting to see if Mercedes can produce a car that can get within at least a second of Red Bull at this point.
I was talking to somebody earlier today, my buddy Ryan, and he was telling me, and I'm going to quote him here, that he wishes that we could get back to more of a bare knuckle, dirty, in the dirt kind of brawl like we saw in 2021. And yeah, those were the good old days. It was a good time to be alive. I won't lie. I've never been more excited and enthralled watching something at 6 a.m. on live TV. But I totally agree. It's kind of a shame that not even Mercedes can kind of knock on the door right now. I'm reading a lot about the fact that some of these cost caps are actually having an opposite effect on teams like Mercedes being able to actually close the gap with Red Bull, because Mercedes has already hit the cost cap. It's causing all kinds of production delays and upgrade delays. But enough about Toto. Enough about that. Let's talk about where Mercedes is right now, which, I mean, honestly, it's not terrible, right?
No,
it could be worse.
It could be a lot worse. And frankly, they got embarrassed at the beginning of this season. Aston Martin and Fernando just jumped them from the get-go. Honestly, I think we would all love if Aston could have maintained the pace, because the battle between Fernando and Lewis really was, in my opinion, the most exciting two-car race happening on the grid over the first 3 to 5 races. Aston has dropped back. Partly, I think it has to do with strategy and with trying to put together the right trajectory for their car over the next 3 to 5 years. But yeah, I think bottom line, Mercedes has just a mountain to climb right now with their car, and they have some, discontent amongst their drivers, behind the wheel right now that they need to figure out fast.
Yeah, agreed. Again, not to beat a dead horse with Mercedes, right? I mean, I think we'll probably have like a separate conversation that will release about zero pods and just the absolute disaster. The absolute certified disaster that somewhat explains why the car is so slow. Yet another reason to watch some more of our videos. Got you again. But in all seriousness, I think Mercedes, it's going to be, maybe they'll be back in the hunt next year. But I think this year it's P2 and move on to 2024.
For sure. Honestly, right now, I think we'd all like to just see out of Mercedes their ability to keep McLaren at bay, because McLaren is the second fastest car on the grid right now. And Lando and Oscar honestly look like a better driver pairing right now than Lewis and George, which is a crazy thing to think, but it's proof is in the pudding on the track at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at we'll jump to this in the McLaren update, which will come in like an hour. But for perspective, McLaren has 103 points this season. In the last 4 races alone, right, they have scored 86 points. That's like 83%. Like, yeah, they are going to catch Mercedes unless something drastic changes. But with that, again, that's kind of the high level on Mercedes. John, you got your Lewis out of your system, I hope. If not, we'll talk about him more, no doubt. But to everybody listening, thanks again for tuning in. We appreciate you very much. Like, subscribe, follow, etc., whatever you feel like doing. Thanks again for coming to Pregame. Cheers.
Cheers.